"I know what you did," he said. He didn't look up from the desk. He was signing something. A check, a contract, some piece of paper that mattered to him. And he said those 4 words the way a person says close the door on your way out. Casual, final, like it had already been decided. Nadia stood in the doorway of his home office, her hands pressed flat against her stomach, and felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Nathan, don't." Now he looked up. His eyes were the same pale gray she had fallen in love with 3 years ago, and right now they were completely empty. "I spoke to Dr. Finman's office this morning. The receptionist confirmed that no prenatal appointment was ever booked in your name. There was no 12-week scan. There was no pregnancy." He put the pen down. There was nothing. The air left the room. If you've ever done something desperate to hold on to someone you were terrified of losing, something you knew was wrong the moment you did it, stay with us. Because this story doesn't go where you think it does. And the twist in the middle of it will stop your heart. Subscribe before we go any further, because what happens next is the kind of thing you'll want to share. Nadia Walsh had met Nathan Vrell at the worst possible time. She was 29, 3 months out of a relationship that had quietly erased her, and working as a structural engineer on a commercial development in downtown Chicago. He was the project's majority investor. He came to the site on a Tuesday in November wearing a hard hat that didn't suit him and asking questions that revealed within about 4 minutes that he actually understood construction. She had not expected that. She had not expected any of it. They were together within 6 weeks. He was 41, decisive, and entirely unsentimental about things that didn't matter, but about the things that did, he was different. He remembered that she took her coffee with oat milk in summer and whole milk in winter because she said the cold called for something heavier. He showed up to her mother's birthday dinner without being asked. He did not say "I love you" easily, but when he said it the first time, sitting in a car outside her apartment building at midnight, he said it like a fact he had been sitting on for too long. She had never been so frightened of losing something in her life. Which is how she ended up in the worst mistake of it. They had been talking, carefully and not quite directly, about the future. He wanted children. He had made that clear. She wanted children too, but she was terrified, specifically, that this was the timeline he was tracking, and that she was already behind on it, and that at some unnamed point he would quietly recalculate and decide she was not the right equation. She had watched her mother lose a man for that reason. She carried it like a bruise she'd stopped noticing until something pressed it. And then, she was 3 weeks late. Not pregnant. She had tested 4 times, but 3 weeks late, with a man who wanted a family and a fear she couldn't articulate, and she had done something she knew instantly, the moment the words left her mouth, was catastrophic. "Nathan," she had said, "I think I might be pregnant." She had not said she was. She had said might. But he had looked at her with something so open and unguarded in his face, something she had never seen there before, a kind of joy that hadn't cleared his throat yet, and she had not corrected it. She had let the might become a yes. And then she had spent 2 weeks fabricating the architecture of a lie she didn't know how to walk back from. She had told him about the appointment she never made. She had showed him a pamphlet from a different clinic. She had watched him tell his sister, his voice low with careful excitement, and she had stood beside him and smiled until her face ached. And now she was standing in his office doorway while he looked at her like she was a stranger wearing her own face. "How long," he said quietly, "were you going to let it go?" "I was going to tell you," she said. "I was trying to find a way." "To tell me what? That there was no baby? Or to find an actual pregnancy to replace the one you invented?" His voice did not rise. That was the thing about Nathan. When he was truly angry, he went very, very still. Which was the plan, Nadia? She couldn't answer that. There had not been a plan. There had only been the terror of losing him and a series of bad decisions made one at a time. "I'm sorry," she said. He picked the pen back up. "You should leave." She left. She drove 40 minutes to her apartment on autopilot, parked badly, sat in the car for 22 minutes, and then went upstairs and sat on the bathroom floor because it was the room with a lock and she didn't trust herself and the others. She had her phone in her hand and she was scrolling, without seeing, the way you do when what you're really doing is trying to survive the next 60 seconds. At some point, she wasn't sure when, she got up. She opened the cabinet under the sink, where she kept the things she never thought about. Painkillers, an old hairdryer, a box of pregnancy tests from the 4 she'd taken a month ago, one left in the packet. She took it. She didn't know why. Muscle memory. Something to do with her hands. She set it on the counter and looked at her phone and didn't look at the test for the full 3 minutes because she already knew what it would say. She looked. 2 lines. She looked again. 2 lines. Dark, clear, unambiguous. She sat back down on the bathroom floor. She was pregnant. She was actually, genuinely, medically pregnant, and the man who was the father had just told her to leave his house. And he was right to, and she had no idea how to be in this situation except badly. She called her sister Priya, who arrived 40 minutes later, still in work clothes, and sat on the bathroom floor with her, and did not say "I told you so" even once, which was an act of love Nadia still thinks about. "You have to tell him," Priya said. "He thinks I lie about pregnancies." "Nadia, I know." She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "I know. I know." She called him the next morning. He didn't pick up. She called again at noon. He didn't pick up. She typed and deleted 7 texts. She wrote one final one that said only, "I need to tell you something." "It's not nothing, please." He called back at 8 that evening. "I'm pregnant," she said. "Actually pregnant. I took a test last night and I went to a clinic this morning, and I am telling you now because I need you to know it's real. And I understand if you don't believe me, and I understand if you never speak to me again. But I needed to say it out loud to you regardless." Silence. "Nathan. Are you there?" "I'm here." His voice was careful, stripped of everything she couldn't read. "Send me the clinic paperwork." She sent it within the hour. The confirmation, the date, the estimated conception window, all of it. She sat at her kitchen table and watched the document transfer on her phone and felt something she had never quite felt before. The specific terror of a truth being weighed by someone who had every reason not to trust her. He called back 40 minutes later. "I need you to come in tomorrow," he said. "To Dr. Feynman's office. Booked this morning. I'll be there." She almost said, "You believe me?" She stopped herself. She had forfeited the right to be surprised by accountability. "I'll be there," she said. The appointment was at 10. He was already in the waiting room when she arrived. He stood when she came in, and he looked at her the way you look at someone when you haven't decided yet, like the verdict is still forming and you're trying not to rush it. They sat side by side in the small room, while Dr. Feynman performed the ultrasound in a silence so complete that Nadia could hear the ambient hum of the equipment. She looked at the ceiling. She was trying not to need anything from him. Then Dr. Feynman said, a specific kind of the kind with weight in it." "What?" Nathan said. Dr. Feynman turned the monitor. "Are you seeing 2? He said pleasantly. "Because there are 2. The room stopped. On the monitor, unmistakable even to Nadia, who had never looked at an ultrasound in her life, were two separate, distinct, flickering points of light. Two heartbeats, side by side, each one going about its business with complete indifference to the wreckage of the adults in the room. Twins. Nathan made a sound she had never heard from him. It was not a word. It was something below words. Something that came from a place that didn't have language yet. He leaned forward, both forearms on his knees, and looked at the monitor and the careful blankness in his face. The controlled, watchful stillness he had worn every moment since she'd walked into his office broke completely open. He covered his face with one hand. She did not look away. She let herself see it. He had not asked to be in this room with a woman who had lied to him. He had come anyway, because whatever else was true, something was happening that was bigger than both of them. And she owed it to him, and to the 2 points of light on the screen, to be completely honest from this moment forward, regardless of what it cost her. "Nathan," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. He was still looking at the screen. Then he lowered his hand and looked at her, and his eyes were wet, and she had never, in 3 years, seen Nathan Vrell cry. "I know what you did," he said. And then, after a pause, "And I know you're terrified." She couldn't speak. "I'm not." He stopped. Started again. "I don't know yet what this means for us. I need time. But I am not walking away from that screen." He looked back at the monitor. "I am not that person." She nodded. She did not ask for more than that. She had learned very recently that asking for more than you've earned is how you end up losing everything. She called Priya from the car park. She said, "Twins." And then she sat on a low concrete wall and laughed and cried simultaneously for about 3 minutes while her sister said nothing and just stayed on the line. What followed was not easy. That would be the wrong story, the dishonest version. The one where the twist erases the damage and everyone gets to pretend the wreckage wasn't real. What followed was 4 months of Nathan holding the fact of the lie and the fact of the twins in both hands, simultaneously, and deciding, slowly, without theatrics, what he was willing to build from the remains of what she had broken. He was a methodical man. He did not perform reconciliation. He rebuilt it like a structure, one load-bearing element at a time, checking each one before adding weight, refusing to continue until he was certain each piece could hold what came next. He went to every appointment. He answered every call, sometimes after a long pause, but he answered. There was a Tuesday in March where he sat across from her at a dinner she had cooked and said nothing meaningful for 2 solid hours, and she did not push him, and that silence was its own kind of progress. He said, on a Thursday evening in April, standing in her kitchen while she was making pasta, and not looking at him, "I think I understand why you did it. I don't think it makes it acceptable, but I understand it." She turned around. "I was so afraid of losing you," she said. It was the first time she had said that out loud to him, the first time she had named the actual thing instead of circling it. "I know," he said. "I could feel it. For months. And I didn't ask about it because I didn't want to open the box." He crossed the kitchen and put his hand on the side of her face, the way he had done the very first time, standing outside her apartment building. "That's on both of us." They were not the same after that. They were something sturdier, stranger, built from the knowledge of what each of them was capable of under pressure, which is the only honest foundation a relationship can actually have. Their daughter Raya arrived 11 minutes before her brother Eli on a Sunday morning in late July, both of them furious about it and vocal from the first breath. Nathan stood at the head of the bed and held Nadia's hand so hard she felt it for 2 days afterward, and when they placed Raya in his arms, he went so completely quiet that a nurse checked on him to see if he was all right. He was all right. He was more than all right. He was a man who had nearly walked away from the 2 best things that had ever happened to him, and he knew it. and that knowledge lived in his face every time he looked at them. He asked Nadia to marry him when the twins were 4 months old in the hospital car park, of all places. They had just been for Eli's checkup. Raya was asleep in the carrier against her chest, and he stopped walking and turned to face her and said, "I'd like to do this right. All of it. I want to build something that lasts." She said yes before he produced the ring. He had it in his coat pocket, which he admitted later he had been carrying it around for 6 weeks, waiting for the right moment, and had eventually accepted that with twins there was no right moment. There was only the moment you decided to go. They were married the following spring, on a Saturday afternoon, in the garden of his house, the house with the office where he had looked at her like a stranger and said, "You should leave." She had thought, standing in that doorway, that it was over, that she had taken the one thing she loved most and she had destroyed it with her own hands. What she had actually done, in the terrible way that some disasters work, was force them both into honesty. Force him into the room. Force herself into the truth. Strip everything decorative away until what remained was either something real or nothing at all. What remained was something real. At the wedding, Nathan's sister gave a toast that made the whole garden laugh and then go quiet, and the last thing she said was, "My brother has never been easy to know." But Nadia figured him out, and then she trusted him enough to show him the worst thing about herself, and he trusted her enough to stay. Nadia held her glass and looked across the garden at Priya, who was holding Eli while Raya slept in the pram beside her, and she thought about the bathroom floor, and the 2 lines, and the specific grace of being known at your worst and chosen anyway. That is the thing nobody tells you about honesty. Not the easy honesty, that this dress suits you, I prefer the other one kind. The real kind. The kind that costs you the one thing you were trying to protect. That honesty doesn't guarantee you keep what you love, but it is the only path to something that can actually hold weight. The lie almost ended them. The truth is what they're building on. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needed to hear it. And subscribe, because every week we tell the stories that don't let go.